So, dear Thai, dear Sangha, let us enjoy 3 more sounds of the bell. That's 3 more opportunities to come back to ourselves and touch our true home inside. Sister Annabelle said yesterday, finding out that your home is where your heart is, where you are finding yourself finding yourself at home in your body, with your heart, and So as we breathe in and out, just allowing ourselves to come home to ourselves. So dear Thai, dear Sangha, today is the 28th of May, year 2019. We are in the Stourbridge Old Swinford Hospital venue for this retreat, 5-day retreat together. And this is the first full day together. We arrived yesterday and hopefully you had a good restful night, already feeling in the embrace of the Sangha, in the embrace of the practice and collective energy of the Sangha, and you enjoyed your noble silence time. Mindfulness can be said to be a source of happiness, and something what I was trying to convey with the children, I don't know how successfully, was remembering good conditions that we have can bring us happiness and actually help us in a difficult moment. One of the meanings of mindfulness, smrti, the Sanskrit word, is to remember, to recall. So bringing our attention to good conditions that we have is a way to help us restore our happiness and sometimes our balance if we've lost some balance. Remembering the good conditions we have So I recall sometimes doing sitting meditation, and perhaps if I'm noticing I'm feeling a bit lonely or something like that, and I can just recall all of the people in my life, maybe spend some breaths with some people. Perhaps they are my mother, perhaps it can be my father. Even my father passed away a long time ago. He's still part of me, as we know from the teachings, that we still have our Father is in us. It can be a friend. Yeah. Many different conditions we can recall, and it can help us to remind us of the good conditions we have, and that we touch this gratitude. And the true gratitude has with it the happiness. This trying to again convey to the children, it's not a forced thing. You should be grateful. There's too many times where we're told, you need to be grateful. And even I was aware, as I was making a comparison with children in other countries, we often can, in a way, make ourselves feel somehow bad that we're not appreciating things because in comparison we're doing well. So it's not, we have to be careful that it's not becoming something we use to have ourselves feel bad. Oh, I'm not grateful enough. That's not the practice. Yeah. Mindfulness is the capacity to be there with what is. And we can direct our mind, we can, as I was just suggesting, to a good condition. And we can also just be able to be there with whatever is, just to notice what is there. And sometimes when we come home to ourself, in the present moment, we discover there's some suffering is also there. And that can cause us to feel, I'm not practicing well because I've got suffering. But that's, again, not to have to feel like that. The fact that you can be there and recognize I have some suffering. Even you're sitting on the cushion and the instruction is feeling peaceful, feeling at ease, but you're not feeling peaceful. But it's okay. You can be at peace, at ease with however you are, even if it's not peaceful. So we could say acceptance. Accepting just things as they are. So the title of this retreat is Being Peace. And we do want to touch that peaceful feeling inside, but also stopping to also be at peace with, even when we're not at peace, to be okay with things as they are. To recognize and be able to smile to our non-peacefulness. And we know like that, things change. It's like bringing the sun to the flower. Eventually, the flower has to unfurl and show itself. So we don't have to do anything, but just to be there with our acceptance, with our compassion. That is to say, our mindfulness, and things can change. In the sutra this morning, the sutra on the discourse on the greatest happiness, one of the greatest happinesses is to be able to, as I was listening to it this morning, was to be able to perceive the Four Noble Truths. And the first noble truth is the existence of suffering. We have suffering that is part of the human condition. So to be able to recognize the suffering that we have is part of the greatest happiness. That's what it says in the sutra, right? So why would being able to become aware of our suffering be part of greatest happiness? And it turns out because the Four Noble Truths contain within them the path leading to happiness. And it's not separate from the existence of suffering. So it allows us to not make a dualism between the suffering and happiness. So we have the expression, no mud, no lotus. It means if you want to make a beautiful flower, you also need the earth, you need the mud. And then the lotus flower is possible because of the mud being there, and some of the substance of the flower is from the earth. But we also need the sunlight and the water to grow the lotus. So the suffering is not enough. The mud is not enough to make the lotus. The suffering is not enough to make our happiness. We need to bring the mindfulness energy to embrace. It's like the sun embracing the flower. We need the seed of the flower, of the lotus. And it turns out that we all have the seeds of happiness in us as well as seeds of suffering. And it turns out that if we can trust ourselves and bring the energy of mindfulness to even the seeds of suffering, they can bring forth the lotus. And even right at the very beginning, when we just accept our suffering, even we haven't done anything yet, it's already changed the situation. The Four Noble Truths contains the path to happiness. It makes the statement that as well as the existence of suffering, there is also the existence of happiness. So if there is a path to happiness, and we become aware of that, we already can relax a little bit. It's like, oh, I have a path. So even we're at the start of a long journey, we know we have 2 feet, and we know the direction we're going, and we can start walking on that path. And that is a great happiness, we can say. We can say that the deepest suffering, the biggest suffering is when we have the suffering, but we don't have a path. We don't have a way. Being able to have a way to embark on that path, we're very grateful to the teachings that allow us to generate the mindfulness energy. Because it is with that mindful energy, the capacity, if you like, to be there with what is, that the path unfolds in itself. It's not even that we have to follow too many detailed instructions. Just mere recognition of what is going on, staying present with what is, and we can watch the process unfold. If you plant a seed in the soil and you give it the water and the sun is there, the plant will grow. It may take some time, but if you get impatient, too impatient, and you start shouting at the seed to grow, and you start reading lots of books about how seeds germinate and do a lot of analysis, and then the plant grows, you may think, oh, it's because of all the shouting I did. Yeah. But in fact, the plant was going to grow anyway. It just needs the right conditions. So we don't have to get too technical. But some instructions can help. Yeah. So the teachings that we get from the Buddha's time, they do give a lot of instructions about how to generate mindfulness, and we talk about the mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind, and mindfulness of the objects of mind. It's already sounding technical, right? But that is to say mindfulness of everything in our domain, our experience of life. We've already been doing some mindfulness of the body. This morning we had a guided meditation where we were even in touch with our intestines, our liver. In the Anapanasati Sutra, the sutra on the full awareness of breathing, it gives there's four tetrads, so there's 4 sets of 4 instructions. The first one belongs to the domain of the body, and it doesn't go into too much detail. It just says, first of all, it connects us with our breathing, which we learned is a way for our mind to come in connection with our body when we become aware of our breathing, because our breathing also belongs to our body. And Sister Annabelle was sharing that yesterday. And then the instruction is becoming aware of the whole body. So just simply breathing in, I am aware of my whole body. So as I sit here, as I breathe in, I'm aware of my whole body. Breathing out, I am aware of my whole body. And as we say those words to each other, we may become aware, oh, I'm not in touch with my body. Like was said, you're sitting at a computer and you're not really there. And that is already good information. Okay, I'm not in touch with my body. And actually the Buddha had a great instruction for that. He said, at least even if you feel like you're not in touch with your body, you can say, I know there's a body here. I love that instruction. Yeah. It's like breathing in. Okay. I don't feel my body, but I know there's a body here somewhere. Yeah. And you maybe pinch yourself. And eventually, you cultivate the awareness, you grow the energy of mindfulness of the body. Bit by bit, maybe you start with your toe. Yeah. If the whole body is too much for you in one go. Or maybe just gradually, this sense of presence of the body becomes more and more apparent. I really have a body here. Yeah, it's really here. And you know it for, it's not just an idea. It becomes the reality. This is my body. And if our body is not in too much pain, pain is a good way of letting us know we have a body. But it's also can be a dominating mental formation. So it's nice to be able to experience the body not in pain. In fact, it can become a very wonderful experience to feel, oh wow, I have this body, and it's not in pain, or not in too much pain. And we can actually say we can enjoy the experience of having a body. We can become curious about, what is this body? Yeah. We can investigate a little bit and just notice what's going on. It turns out our body is things are going on. It's alive. It's not just a statue. Yeah. If we put up a statue of the Buddha meditating, it could give you an image of the posture of the meditation, the stillness. But you may think, oh yeah, I want to be like that Buddha. We have a flower. But then you may also think, yes, but I'm so grateful I'm not stone, not made of stone, because I'm in touch with this living, breathing body. Yeah? That is so complex and so alive, and yet it's all somehow, working in harmony. So, I don't know if, now I'm in England, I think some of you may remember the advert for Bupa, when they started with private health insurance, and they had this advert where they showed this very healthy young woman running across the mountains and saying, your body is a miracle, we want to get our life insurance policy. Or something like their health insurance, whatever it was. But they did a good job of kind of illustrating just like what a miracle it is to have a body. It's a shame it was for an advert, But we don't need $1 million advertising. We just need our own experience. Just this simple act of coming back and recognizing, I have this body. And it can do all of these things. It is all of these things. If we're studied in the medical arts, for a doctor, or we maybe become aware of so many miracle aspects to the body and how it develops from all the different systems. When they teach, I was once invited to go into a class in a school in Hebden Bridge, and it was a school which is actually incorporating mindfulness in. And so they said, can you talk about this subject, but in connection with mindfulness? So the subject was the circulatory system. So I got the children to do a meditation on to actually experience their circulatory system in their body as they were sitting there. And so they've got the anatomical pictures, and we even got the pictures to really show the incredible branching of all of the blood vessels and how it permeates every part of your body. So you can, if you just isolate all of the blood vessels, that's all you see, you still see the human form, all its fullness, because the blood vessels are part of everything. And so it's quite amazing, and then describing how the blood is flowing and the oxygen and the nutriments, etc. But then somehow experiencing that in the meditation, embodying that knowledge, saying, "Oh yeah, that's me too," and noticing your heart. So this, we talk about Buddhism sometimes as a science, because we investigate, but it's not a third-party investigation. It's not like separating the object and the subject. It's like the subject and object are one. It's first, you could say it's first-hand experience. You're not just an observer, you're a participant. So there's another instruction that I really like in the Mindfulness Sutra of the Buddha that goes back. Now mindfulness is all the rage in the West, right? Maybe partly thanks to Thai, I like to think. When we went to Ireland, there was the Irish Times had as the headline. When Thai arrived, he was handed the newspaper and it said, "The father of mindfulness comes to Ireland." Thai smiled. Okay, I'm the father. But we also have to credit way back, to the Buddha's time, because these sutras are extraordinary. They're still very practical. And this instruction, aware of the body in the body, that's a very deep instruction. It also gives you the option, aware of the body from outside the body. You can try that one too. But this awareness of the body in the body, being really in the body and aware of it from within. So you are the participant. You are the subject and object of your meditation are one. And it goes on to talk about feelings and the mind and the objects of mind in the same way. Aware of the feelings in the feelings, objects of mind. So mind in the mind, and even objects of mind. In the objects of minds, it would mean like if the object of mind was a tree, you're in the tree. You're in the. So you're no longer experiencing. When you're looking at, say, for instance, a tree, it's not like this separate thing outside of you, but there's a connection. You're experiencing it. That comes into the realm of interbeing, right? Which we talk more about on this retreat. We're not separate from things, from anything. We inter-are. That's a beautiful teaching. Thai once said, has said, that in a sense the reason we're here, the purpose of our practice, is to awaken from the illusion of a separate self. So when we separate ourselves and think, I am this, and this is all I am, we are not in touch with the reality of interbeing. And this is another deep teaching that helps us not feel, we suffer a lot from that feeling of being isolated. But going back to the very simple instructions of coming to the body, aware of the body, in the body, in a sense we are allowing ourselves just to come back to this. So okay, I inter-am with the whole cosmos, and yet I am just, right now, I'm just experiencing just being this body. What is this body? In a way, this body is my universe. This body is what I have. And I can be grateful for this body. So when I talk to the children about gratitude, I also talked about being grateful for their body, grateful for themselves. So when we become aware of our body, we can touch gratitude. And we also become aware of our feelings. And feelings are given a rough division into different types. So you have pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings. You have neutral feelings. And there's a fourth category, mixed feelings. So an example could be given, when you're really stiff and you feel achy and somebody gives you a massage and it's very painful, but it's a kind of also a nice feeling. That kind of, you could say that's a mixed feeling of the body. There's some pain, but there's also pleasure. There's a pleasant feeling. When it comes to feelings, there are feelings that originate, that really we recognize as belonging to the body. So I'm feeling tension. We were given the instruction, smiling to tension in the body, releasing tension. And there are feelings that are more associated with, we could say, the mind. So feeling sad, some of the emotions we might connect more with the mind. And that it can be a useful distinction. Is this feeling arising from my body? Maybe, or is it from my mind? And sometimes we can have what seems like an emotion, a difficult feeling, an unpleasant emotion, and we discover, I'm just thirsty. I just need a drink of water, and I feel so much better. And we think, gosh, it was that simple. So sometimes we need to really check, am I taking care of myself physically? Our mind can be so affected by the environment and our physical well-being. If we're very tired, it's easy to get grumpy, for instance. But if we just had some sleep, our freshness back, we can be very generous and present for each other. So the connection is also, in describing that, you're immediately seeing the connection between body and mind, actually. So that you could say the distinction between feelings arising in the body and the mind, it's not so easy to separate them. But nevertheless, it can be useful to notice, and say, So, if we have awareness, mindfulness of the feelings, noticing what is going on, we don't have to react to the feeling. You can just say, oh, this is a pleasant feeling. This is an unpleasant feeling. And the image is given of sitting on the bank and watching the feelings. And then there is also the instruction of, as I said before, being in the feeling, really allowing the feeling to be fully felt. So you've got both ways you can experiment. Sitting on the bank, watching the feelings come and go, and maybe there's a combination of the two, that you're somehow allowing those feelings to be felt, and there's still a sense in which you've got some space around it, and it's happening. You're not overwhelmed by it, so then the image of being on the bank fits as well, because you're able to stay stable. Feelings come, feelings go. You see the flow and the impermanence. I remember one, you could say a victory I had with this practice was one time I was living in Scotland and we went camping. And I got out of the tent and there was a pub across the road. It was before I became a monk, of course. Yeah. But I was still practicing the 5 trainings. I just didn't drink the beer in the pub. But it was to get from the pub was at the foot of the Buccleuch Moor. It's one of my favourite mountains there. Just to give a bit of context. And I remember I got out of the tent and you had to time it before you unzipped, because as soon as you unzipped there would be this cloud of midges just go for you, right? So we had to make a dash to get into the building. And I did this, but not without getting lots of midge bites, However much I covered my head, they would, wow. And when I got in, I remember sitting down, and my friends, they maybe also, got the midge bites, but for some reason for me, it was really bad. And my face started to puff up. Yeah? It's like I got a kind of histamine reaction or something. And I was aware of that sometimes happens to me with also pollen and things like that. So I was aware, wow, I'm getting a really strong reaction. I went to the mirror in the bathroom and I saw my face all puffed up. And I thought, well, I don't have any antihistamine tablet. I don't know what... and this is really... I started to panic. So the way I was relating to this experience was actually panicking. Like, this is terrible. What am I going to do? And it was a very unpleasant feeling. And then I remembered, because I'd been reading Thai, reading the sutras, and I just allowed myself to come in to my body and just allow the feeling to be felt fully. So I felt my skin, I felt this experience, but I came back to my breathing, and I stayed stable. I stayed in a stable place. And the miracle, mini miracle, let's say, mini victory was, it all calmed down, almost immediately, just within a minute, and the swelling went down. So it was an experience that, I wouldn't want to repeat. I'm not going to be too scientific and go and expose myself to midges again on purpose. But it was a real experience to realize that, wow, if this practice can do that, that's quite impressive, And of course, that's a small example of how the practice can, but it illustrates something about how it gave me this illustration of how to apply the practice. The same, because the same can be true with when we have strong emotions. So as a monk, I got to use the same method, but with anger. So I had the emotion of anger after a meeting. Meetings are good for stirring and watering the brothers. And because I don't always agree with everything, right? So get angry, or the way somebody said something. So I can't remember the particular. I can't remember what the midge storm was equivalent in the meeting. All I remember is I got angry, and then after the meeting I was talking with a group of brothers, and I was trying to reason, talk about it in a sort of calm way, but then it got re-stimulated, and then I was able to, because I don't know if you can do this in your workplace, but I was able to bow and say, sorry, I just got angry, I'm going to go and take care of my anger. So not blaming them, but just saying, recognizing and acknowledging. You can find more appropriate, maybe more skillful ways to excuse yourself, but basically I was excusing myself, and I went off and I sat with my anger in exactly the same way that I sat with the midge bites. Just I went to the body, and actually, although the emotion, you could say it's mental, the feeling, the emotion, the anger, in fact it had a physical correspondence. So I was able to feel heat in my body, in my chest. I felt tightness in my body, and I just was with that. I just breathed with that and let that kind of be felt and let it move. And by being able to be present, it somehow was able to circulate. And then that energy of anger shifted, calmed down, and I was able to well, the funny thing is, when you're, it's again what I was saying about mindfulness. Once you have the happiness of just being able to be with what is, it doesn't have to be a wonderful thing that you're with to feel happy. Just being knowing that you're in the situation where you can actually be with what is. And I was with this anger energy. I also experienced happiness. So you could say I was experiencing a mixed feeling. Because I can't say that the anger energy was pleasant, but being able to be with it gave me a really good feeling. Gosh, I can be with this. And yeah, I don't have to be overwhelmed. And then it calms down, it changes, and there is something that when you do like that, I also then got clarity about my anger, like what was really behind it, what was really going on. I got clarity, mental clarity about what I wanted to say. So it can actually be a very useful thing, because often we feel like if I don't express my anger and express from my anger, then I'm denying something important. But it turns out if you take care of your anger, then when you express, you've somehow cooked your anger a bit, and what you then can express has more clarity, and it doesn't have to be blaming the other person. It's more, you see clearly what will actually help also to express in the situation. So it can save a lot of suffering from the consequences of expressing directly from the anger, is to take care of it. So that is something about mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings. in the body and feelings originating from emotions in the mind. Yeah. I'd like to have a sound of the bell for us to just be with our breathing. I'm aware of my feet have gone numb. Aware of my feet. I give them time. Give time for the blood to circulate again. Blood's coming back. Impermanence. So we have the 4 gratitudes this morning for the children, and then there's the 4 noble truths that I mentioned, that were mentioned in the sutra on great happiness. Did you notice in the sutra on great happiness this morning it said hanging out with monks and nuns also? So it's always good to get that plug in there. I like hanging out with monks and nuns too. So, the 4 noble truths, because it's nice to define the teaching here. So the first noble truth, let's give it a 1. The first noble truth is suffering. Sometimes we say ill-being. It exists. It is a reality we experience. It is not, when we know it's there in us, in our life experience. To some degree, it's there. We can identify elements of suffering all the time. And we see it around us too. And it can make us sad. It can make us suffer more when we dwell on the suffering. But it would be silly to deny its existence. And part of the path is to not run away from our suffering, but to say, okay, I have this suffering. And that is different from dwelling in suffering in the way that increases the suffering. But we're going to come back to that point. The second noble truth is there is a cause of suffering. A famous line from the Buddha is, "This is because that is." So that also sounds very scientific. One thing leads to another. If there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering. And by looking into the nature of our suffering, we may have a chance to see what caused it. It may be very simple, like I mentioned, I'm thirsty. That's why I'm suffering. I just need a drink of water. Or it may be much more complex, go deep. I'm suffering. Let's give an example of one of the reasons it can be very, when we do sitting meditation and we calm ourselves, we can get in touch with a lot of thinking, a lot of background anxiety that when kind of going around during the day, we were not aware of it in a clear way. But when we sit, we see, I've got this kind of background anxiety going on. And so you're becoming aware of the existence of that kind of suffering in you. And then you have a chance to look into its cause. What is feeding the suffering? We sometimes talk about the suffering in terms of nutriments, what is feeding it. And the third noble truth is happiness exists. There is such a thing as happiness. There is such a thing as well-being. And just as there is a cause to our suffering, there is also a cause to our happiness. So we could say the cause of happiness and sometimes we say the path leading to well-being. And what is that path? And as we've been talking about mindfulness as allowing us to relate to our suffering, then mindfulness is very much a part of the path. Mindfulness allows us to be there with our suffering and relate to it in a way which leads to well-being. We could ask, how does that happen? But almost we don't need to. We just allow ourselves to trust, make the experience. I don't actually know what exactly. I could probably, if I was a neuroscientist or something, explain what happened with the midge bites. Did I go into my parasympathetic? Did I deactivate some cascading inflammation reaction with the histamine? I don't know. Because it's a sort of miracle that happened, like in terms of the biochemistry of it. Maybe there could be a few PhDs to study that. I don't need to know. I just needed to apply the teaching of coming back, being with. And there was an element of being at peace with the situation. So I can say it wasn't just feeling the feeling. It was also stopping what we call in Buddhism the second arrow, where you get anxious about the suffering. You are frightened of the consequences, or you are maybe even angry with yourself for being in this place. I'm supposed to be more peaceful, and you're angry with yourself for not being more, for not touching peace quicker or something. So that is increasing the lack of peace, and part of the way is to let go of your reaction to to yourself, and just say, it's okay, it's like this, and be at peace with that. And that is the beginning of being peace. And that is the first step. That's the primary step on the path to well-being and happiness. If you can just to stop and say, okay, I'm okay with this suffering as it is. I've identified the suffering. And being happy in that moment that you've identified it. Maybe you name it. Sometimes it can really help to name the suffering that is there. So that is listing the Four Noble Truths. So there is a path to suffering. there is a path to happiness. And the suffering is somehow needed for the happiness. It's like the substance of it. That is the no mud, no lotus teaching. So they're not separate. We can talk about mindfulness as the path. It's actually only one of the 8 elements of the Eightfold Path. You could say it's a very important one, but we talk about the Eightfold Path. So Tai was once asked, because if mindfulness is being offered as a kind of in places where they're causing suffering, is it ethical? Is it ethical to bring mindfulness into the army or into the corporations? Is it just being used as a way to calm people down so that they can then go on to do more bad things? Something. That has been an ethical kind of question. But it turns out that mindfulness cannot be separated from compassion, cannot be separated from, you could say, ethics, in the sense of right actions. Once we get truly aware of what is happening in ourselves, there's a natural connection to what is the right thing to do. Because we get connected to ourself, we get connected to our situation. We touch, in a sense, our reverence for life. And naturally we also then have reverence for life around us, which we're not separate from. And the desire to not do harm is no longer a moral question. It becomes just a real desire not to cause harm. Ahimsa is the Sanskrit word, harmlessness. It becomes it arises. So in the Eightfold Path, we have the element of mindfulness, which we are very familiar with. There's also, we call it right mindfulness, implying there can be a wrong mindfulness, right? And if we look into that possibility, there is wrong mindfulness, what it could be that we're drawing, because attention and mindfulness are connected. So what we pay attention to, we're being mindful of. So we have something where if you put your attention on something negative, you can create more negative feelings. And the way in which you're putting your attention on something may be based in aversion or may be based in desire. You are giving attention to something. And that doesn't necessarily lead then to the happiness. So there is this right mindfulness aspect, this quality of presence. And we've tried to point to it by talking about being being at peace with what is, being okay. It doesn't mean we don't we condone or we accept in the sense of despair, but we accept in the sense of, okay, we face what is, and we allow ourselves to be, to allow it to be there, but we also trusting that being present, conditions can change. If we are looking for a place where there is no suffering, that's also a trap. We need our suffering to grow our wisdom and our compassion. So there was a lovely phrase we heard recently of somebody who wrote a poem saying, "The Pure Land, or heaven, is a place where there is no suffering." And if it stops there, then it's kind of against the teachings, because if there's no suffering, there is no mud to grow our lotuses. But it went on to say, there is no suffering I cannot face, I cannot be with. If we have a way to relate to our suffering, the suffering is okay. And we can even be grateful for it. So we could even add a gratitude of grateful for suffering. And we can look in our life and we can see there have been times where maybe we experienced some loss, we experienced some deep suffering, but because of the way our life has gone, we look back and we say, you know what, I wouldn't throw that away, that experience, because somehow it has deepened my understanding and my compassion. So it's for ourselves to look and see and verify that that is indeed true, and then also apply that to our present suffering and say, well, maybe this present suffering that I really want to get rid of is also, can be a gift. But to have the way to relate to it, that is the key. To be able to relate to our suffering in a way which doesn't cause us to suffer more. It's already the suffering is enough that we have. And then we're on this path. So that is to touch on those subjects. The next thing we will have is our walking meditation. And we were already given some wonderful instructions, and maybe we will hear more about walking meditation. But it is also the opportunity to continue to practice awareness of the body, awareness of the feelings, awareness of the mind, and awareness of the nature, so that we don't lose the opportunity to be grateful for what we have. And one of the great conditions we have is to be able to practice together. We have the collective energy. We support each other in the practice. So when we're walking together, it's like we walk as one. We could call it a sangha body. We walk as we're in harmony with each other, and yet at the same time, we're doing something very intimate onto ourselves, of just being very, our responsibility to really take care of this body, to become aware, to be in on ourselves, and yet we're aware that we're part of the Sangha, the community, and there's a collective energy that's supporting us. So I think I'll finish there, and thank you for your kind attention.